Walker is in Minnesota. Hi, Walker. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Dave?
Better than I deserve. What's up?
Yeah. So I own two businesses. I design and inspect residential and commercial septic systems in the summertime. And in the wintertime here, I shovel snow and remove ice dams from roofs. My top line between the two last year was about $250,000. And up until 2 weeks ago, my business was just me. I recently just hired a part-time administrative support person to assist with some of the paperwork that I don't have much time for. So I worked for my family excavation business that my dad started for about 8 years before I started my companies. The plan was that my parents would pass the business down to me and my younger brother. As I gained more responsibility with his company, and it became evident to me that my dad and I weren't on the same page with a lot of things. And so, and things weren't very good at the company financially. So I left the business about 5 years ago. And since then, my dad has asked me to come back and work for him many times. Each time I've denied his request. But he recently approached me about buying out my company and coming back as a part owner, and asked me to run the business so that he could focus on being at the job sites, be more of a foreman, because he wants to step down. Through a lot of discussion, I countered him with taking over 100% of the company now as the full owner. And then since I'd be running the company, and then we put him on like a lifetime or a lifelong salary upon his retirement in exchange for the company. He likes that idea, wants to move forward. My question to you is this. I have a laundry list of things that need to improve at the company. Company morale is a really big one of them. I'm starting kind of at a negative with company morale, and I'm wondering what advice you'd have for me to avoid coming in and overwhelming people by making a bunch of changes without disrespecting my dad and what he's built, and also possibly making morale worse at the company.
Wow. How many team members there?
8, not including my dad.
And what do they do?
So they do excavation, all sorts of anything to do with heavy equipment. A lot of new
all 8 of them run dozers?
No.
That's what I'm asking.
Sorry. They have 4 truck drivers, 2 main operators, and then the rest are just laborers.
No office staff?
No, none.
Okay. How is the operational things, the administrative things getting done?
So my dad and my mom kind of tag team it as they have time for it, but that's the biggest hole in the company right now, is that none of that's managed well, and so their finances and their organization is just a mess, and that's what they're looking for help with at this point.
What's the top line of this company?
They did 1.4 last year.
Okay. All right. Okay, let me back through a couple things. I got to clean my head out before I go back to your original question, all right? Because I kind of am afraid I see another conflict coming with you and your dad at some point. As soon as you start some of these things, he's going to walk back in as if he's the owner again and start telling you what to do, that he doesn't like the fact that you made that guy that's worked for him for 10 years mad.
Yep.
How are we going to prevent that?
Yeah.
Your dad's going to potentially undermine anything you do to try to change anything.
Right. That was my concern for many, many years, and that's why I chose to leave, because he wasn't willing to make any changes. But when he approached me a couple of weeks ago, he told me, he said, I'm exhausted and tired of doing what I'm not good at for this business, because what I'm good at is the actual physical work. He said, I can't run a business. I'm no good at it. And he said, I would trust that you would do a better job at this. So I want you to take it over.
I think you guys need to sit down and write out a personal agreement between the two of you that says that. He needs to write that down, or you can type it up and let him sign it. That says that. So that, and then I would just look at him and say, because, Dad, when I start making some of these changes, it's going to be painful for you, and it's going to be hard for you to stay on the dozer.
Mm.
And I don't want us to end up in conflict. And I'm not going to choose this business above my father. I love my father, and I'm not going to enter into a thing here where you and I end up at odds.
Right.
So we've got to have very clear, and if you don't write it down while he's feeling that way, later on when he's not feeling that way, he'll forget it. Not because he's a bad guy, but because he's a doer. He's a founder. He began this thing, and then you can that way you can pay him honor and he can pay you honor. And so when some of the old guys run to him and say, "Well, Walker's screwing this up," he can say, "You know what? I turned it over to Walker. It's his. So if you got a problem with Walker, you need to go talk to Walker."
Yeah.
So it's like when my daughter, the first daughter of mine to get married was Rachel Cruz, who's a Ramsey personality now. And Rachel is a high energy drama person who's very smart and very talented. And I told her husband to be that I was going to tell her this, and I did tell her this. I said, "Rachel, I love you and I'll always be your dad. But the first time that you come to me after you're married telling me something that's wrong with Winston, I'm going to tell you to go talk to your husband."
Yeah.
And that's what I need your dad to do, okay?
Yep.
Because that's going to come up. It's part of being married. It's part of being young married. And I knew it was going to come up. And her dad's a big personality. Rachel's is. I know him. And he's got issues. And I knew she would run to him if we didn't set this up. You follow me? And I know your dad, and I kind of like your dad. I think your dad's a good dude. And the humility that he's showing to make this move is, man, that's hard. That is something to pay honor to.
Absolutely. Yep.
So, all right, now how are we going to make these changes? So there's a story in the Bible of Nehemiah, and the walls around the city in the Old Testament of Jerusalem had been torn down by the Babylonians and by everybody else for that matter. And when the walls of a city in the ancient world were torn down, the city was vulnerable to every thief or robber or pirate that wanted to just walk in there and take stuff, and it wasn't safe for the inhabitants of the city. It was impossible to do commerce. It was impossible to raise a family and have a good civilization until the walls were back up. You follow me?
Yep.
So Nehemiah got permission from the king of Babylon to rebuild the walls. And so you've gotten permission to come in and make changes. You're now the guy. Now, Nehemiah was appointed. He was given letters from the king that gave him authority to come in and do what needed to be done to get the walls back up, and it was Nehemiah's desire to get the walls back up. He did not come in and start appointing people to build the wall. He walked around the city on a listening tour, and he would talk to the soldiers, and the soldiers would say, "You know what, Nehemiah? Things are bad here." And Nehemiah would say, "Well, I think the walls are down." They say, "Yeah, the walls are down." And that means all of the things I said earlier. When the walls are down, it's bad. And then he would talk to the aristocrats, and they would say, and the noblemen, and they would say, "Things are bad." He goes, "Yeah, I think the walls are down." They went, "The walls are down." And he kept walking around and saying this over and over and over again until then when he walked up to them, he said, "What do you think we ought to do, guys?" And they said, "Well, the walls are down. We got to get the walls up." He made it their idea by listening and talking. So I think you start meeting with each of the people and say, okay, if you were running this business, what do you think our biggest problems are and how would you fix them? Or your number one problem, and how would you fix it? And don't make any comments. Just listen and write it down. Just nod like a therapist with a patient on the couch. Just go, and write it down, write it down, write it down, write it down. And gather and listen and listen and listen and listen. Because they're going to tell you, Walker, the things that you're already wanting to do.
Yep.
But now it's their idea. And you get together with everybody, then you go, I talked to all 8 of you. 3 of you said we ought to do this. What do you guys think about that? And they go, yeah, let's do that. I think that this is a problem inside of our company. And I think almost every single thing you do, you either can plant into their heads and make it their idea, or they already have the idea and they're going to bring it up. And all you've got to do is activate it. That's pulling the team rather than pushing the team. Leaders pull, bosses push. You can walk in there with muddy boots and tell everybody, by God, what to do because you're in charge, and they'll do it, and 3 of them will quit.
Right.
Because it was your idea. But
Sure.
if you'll pull a drawstring on this and listen and listen and listen and pull and pull and pull, you'll probably only lose 1 of the 8.
Sure.
But if you walk in there and start cracking the whip with a cattle prod to get the herd moving, you're going to lose a bunch of them. And you're going to have trouble with morale. Because they're going to say stuff like morale's bad. You told me that, right?
Yep.
I think they know that, don't you?
I think that they do, yep.
And when they say that, you go, okay, why is morale bad? And then they'll tell you, okay, what do you think we need to do to fix it? And then they'll tell you. And they may or may not be wrong, or they may or may not be right. I don't know. But you can just make that judgment later, but you can take pieces of those conversations and come back in and go, and they'll go, this Walker guy's different. He just kind of walks around and does what we tell him to do.
Sure. Yeah.
Because Nehemiah made it the leaders and the soldiers and the public's idea to rebuild the walls, but he came there with a mission to do it. And so once it was their idea, then everybody put their back into it, and the walls were up in no time. But he spent 2 weeks on a listening tour before he went, you know what? All you guys said the walls are down. Maybe we ought to put the walls up. And they went, yeah, let's put the walls up. And that's kind of what I'm asking you to do. I think it'll work for you. And we've had leaders inside of our organization move into areas after we moved a different leader out that wasn't working, and the area was struggling. And if that leader will walk in there and just shut up and listen, the team will gather together. The team already knows what the flip to do. Most of the time, it's kind of obvious. So I think you're going to be just fine. I think you're an amazing young guy, and I think you've set some excellent terms. You've put together the only way I would recommend you go back into this at 100%. And so you and your dad have come to good terms. Let's make sure you maintain a quality relationship where you're able to honor him at all times to the team. You don't ever say an unkind thing about him to your team ever. Ever. You say it to your wife when you get home, but you don't say about him anything unkind. You have to pay the old guy honor. It's the only way this works. And then he has to promise to not undercut you in the field. When you start doing something, he has to say, you need to talk to Walker. Got to talk to Walker. Walker's in charge now. If that's the best he can do. Or he can say, I trust Walker. That'd be even better, right? And I've turned it over to Walker because I trust him, and I think he's going to be able to do this. Why don't you guys give him a shot? He can back you, but at a minimum, he just got to kind of say nothing and go talk to Walker. He can't be rolling his eyes and undercutting you and be a listening ear for a whiny gossip. He can't be any of those things in this work. And you guys need to say all of that out loud. Dad, I'm not going to do anything but honor you in front of the team ever as long as I breathe. Period. Even after you're gone, I will always speak highly of you in their presence. They will never hear me say, if there's anything you and I disagree about, it'll be between you and me, and it'll be behind closed doors. I will not say anything in front of them, and I'm asking the same in return. That's our agreement. And that'll work, dude. And that's fair. That's fair. But sometimes if you say it out loud, it keeps that crap from happening. It's like around here, we say we have a no gossip policy. What's that? It's handing negatives anywhere but up. Hand your negatives up. Everybody's got negatives. There's 1,100 people in this building. There's 1,100 people to be pissed off at it one way or another. A lot of reasons for conflict, right? Hand your negatives up. If you hand them sideways or down, that's just whining and complaining and bitching and moaning. We'll warn you once and then we'll fire you because we don't want a bunch of dadgum backstabbing, whiny gossips in the building. Life's too freaking short to work with those kind of people. And you know what? Our team, when you survey our team, they really like that. They don't have a tolerance for gossips either. It's not just top down, it's bottom up as well. And that's called building a culture. And that's what you're laying out to do here. You're really changing the culture, changing the look on what we're doing and how we're doing it. Very well done, sir. You're a quality young man.